My name is Maren Whitlock. I'm 33 years old, and last Saturday afternoon, in the backyard of my little brick house in Pittsburgh, I watched my brother's 11-year-old daughter dump a flower pot full of wet dirt onto my daughter's birthday cake. Not just any cake. It was a red velvet cake shaped like a cardinal, the kind of bird my late husband, Elliot, used to tell Lila meant someone you loved was visiting from heaven. Lila had turned 7 that morning. She had stood on a kitchen chair the night before, hair clipped back with 2 red barrettes. She traced the recipe from Elliot's old notebook with one finger while I measured cocoa and buttermilk. That notebook still had his handwriting in it. Slanted, hurried, alive in a way photographs never were. When the dirt hit the frosting, it spread slowly over the red wings, over the little black candy eye, over the crooked words Lila had piped herself. Happy 7th, Lila. For a few seconds, no one moved. Lila didn't cry. That was the part that broke something in me. She just looked at the cake, then at me, like she was waiting for my face to tell her whether this was something a child could survive. My niece, Brielle, stood there holding the empty pot with both hands. Her mouth trembled once. Then she said, barely above a whisper, "My mom said it's just a cake." Behind her, my sister-in-law, Tessa, sighed, like I was the embarrassing one. My brother Dorian looked at the grass, someone's paper plate folded in the wind. I did not scream. I did not touch Brielle. I picked up my daughter, carried her inside, and closed the sliding door behind us. That night, after Lila finally fell asleep with Elliot's recipe notebook under her pillow, I opened a spreadsheet named Family Support. By morning, my family would learn what that cake had really cost them. Welcome to the channel. Before we start, go ahead and subscribe for more stories. Quick challenge. Check your phone battery. Above 50%, say 1. Below 50%, say 2. Let's see which side wins. Enjoying the stories? If you like the stories, buy us a coffee via the link in the description. Now, get comfortable, because today's story takes a turn you won't expect. Let's begin. Before I tell you what was inside that spreadsheet, you need to understand why I was afraid to total it. Before the dirt, before the cake, before my daughter learned that grown-ups could smile while something sacred was being ruined, my life was small in the way I had worked very hard to make it safe. I live on the south edge of Pittsburgh in a brick house with a narrow driveway and a porch rail that needs repainting. A maple tree drops red leaves into the gutters every October. The house is not impressive from the street, but it is ours, mine and Lila's. Every room has been arranged around the two of us learning how to keep going. I work at Allegheny Mercy Hospital as a health insurance coordinator. That means I spend my days explaining deductibles to people who are already scared, calling insurance companies that put me on hold for 47 minutes, and translating medical bills into language families can survive. I know procedure codes. I know denial letters. I know the exact sound a person makes when they realize being sick also comes with paperwork. Numbers do not frighten me. Systems do not frighten me. Waiting rooms, claim forms, overdue balances, those things I can handle. Family was harder. Elliot died 3.5 years before that birthday party. He was 34, a maintenance technician who could fix an elevator door with one hand and make pancakes shaped like animals with the other. He went into the hospital on a Wednesday with chest pain we thought was serious but manageable. By Friday morning, a doctor with tired eyes was standing in front of me, using words that made the hallway tilt. Lila was 3.5 then. Too young to understand death, old enough to keep asking when Daddy was coming home. After the funeral, everyone told me not to make big decisions. So I didn't. I stayed in the house. I kept Elliot's boots by the basement door for 6 months. I paid the mortgage. I packed lunches. I learned how to cry quietly in the shower, because little girls listen through walls. And I held on to my brother's family with both hands. My brother, Dorian, was 5 years older than me. Loud where I was careful. Charming where I was useful. His wife, Tessa, had a way of making every request sound like a shared value. Their daughter, Brielle, was only a few years older than Lila, and for a while, I let myself believe that was enough. A cousin. A Thanksgiving table. Someone to sit beside my daughter at Christmas so the empty chair where Elliot should have been did not look so large. That is the thing grief does that nobody warns you about. It turns ordinary invitations into lifelines. It makes you grateful for people who show up halfway. Because halfway still feels better than nobody. So when Dorian needed help, I helped. When Tessa said Brielle's lessons were expensive, I listened. When my phone buzzed with another small emergency, I told myself this was what family did. I did not see the pattern then. Or maybe I did see it, and I looked away, because losing them felt more dangerous than paying them. The first payment was so small I almost respected how harmless it looked. 3 weeks after Elliot's funeral, Dorian called while I was standing in the pharmacy line at Allegheny Mercy. I had children's fever reducer in one hand, and my insurance badge in the other. His voice was soft in that careful way people use around widows, and he said Brielle's Keystone Junior Performance Program, a mix of dance, stage movement, and competitive showcase training, had raised its monthly fee, $540. Just for 1 month, he said. Just until he caught up. I remember shifting the medicine bottle under my arm and thinking that if I said yes quickly, he would not hear how tired I was. So I said yes. That was how it started. Not with a demand, not with a fight, with a little emergency wrapped in family language. The next month, Tessa texted that Brielle needed a phone because the coaches were starting group updates and she could not be the only child left out. $96 a month on my plan. Then came the summer intensive deposit, then the shoes, then the competition jacket with her name stitched on the sleeve. Then Dorian's brakes, because how was he supposed to get Brielle to practice if the car was unsafe? Every request came with a reason. Every reason came with a child's face attached to it. I built the spreadsheet because that is what my hands do when life starts lying to me. At work, I tracked denials and balances. At home, I tracked what I was too afraid to name. I named it family support, as if the gentleness of a name could keep it from becoming obvious. Date, amount, memo, paid to, reason. 42 months of quiet rows, each one looking reasonable by itself. 500 here, 96 there. A grocery delivery when Tessa's online sales were slow. A utility bill when Dorian said payroll at the gym had been delayed again. I entered every number. I saved every receipt. I never totaled the column. There are truths you can live beside, as long as you do not invite them to sit across from you. Meanwhile, my own life got smaller by inches. The leak above Lila's bedroom stayed patched with a plastic bucket through 2 thunderstorms because roofers wanted money up front. My car made a clicking sound every time I turned left, and I learned which streets had fewer left turns. Lila asked about piano lessons after school because Junie Patel was taking them, and I told her maybe in the spring. Spring came, then summer, then another fall, and the piano flyer stayed under a magnet on the fridge until the corners curled. But Brielle never missed a class. Her fees cleared on the first. Her phone stayed active. Her camps were paid before the early bird deadlines. Every time resentment rose in my chest, I swallowed it with the same excuse. I told myself every transfer was buying Lila one more familiar face at the next holiday table. That is how they made me useful. Not all at once, just $540 at a time. That was the part I did not understand then. Usefulness can look like love for a long time, especially in a family that pats you on the head for making yourself small. To understand Dorian, you have to hear the rule our childhood ran on. It was never written down. Nobody stitched it on a pillow or said it before dinner. But it lived in every car ride, every school night, every birthday where one child got applause and the other got reminded to be grateful. Dorian has potential. That was the sentence. Dorian has potential, so Dorian needs room. Dorian has potential, so Dorian needs help. Dorian has potential, so Maren can wait. When we were kids, potential meant new cleats when his old ones still fit. It meant weekend tournaments 3 counties away, while I stayed with Aunt Miriam and did my spelling homework at her kitchen table. It meant our house cutting coupons for groceries and somehow still finding money for a private coach because Dorian was right on the edge of something big. I used to think that edge was a place, a doorway, a finish line. I grew up waiting for him to cross it so the rest of us could stop standing behind him. He never did. Not really. Dorian was handsome in the easy way that makes adults forgive lateness. He could walk into a room 10 minutes after everyone else and still make people feel lucky he came at all. Teachers called him spirited. Coaches called him raw talent. Relatives called him our family's best shot. When he forgot homework, someone said he was busy training. When I brought home straight A's, someone said, "That's our Maren. Always so responsible," and then asked me to help set the table. Responsible is a pretty word for the child who learns not to need too much. I do not say that because I hated my brother. I didn't. That would have been cleaner. I loved him in the complicated way. Younger sisters love older brothers who can make them laugh and make them vanish in the same afternoon. Dorian taught me how to throw a spiral in the alley behind our house. He once punched a boy 2 grades above me for calling me mousy. Then he borrowed my birthday money the next week and forgot to pay it back. Both things were true. That is what made him difficult to stop loving. Aunt Miriam saw it before I had words for it. She lived 20 minutes away, in a yellow house with storm windows and a freezer full of casseroles labeled in blue tape. Every Thanksgiving, she watched the same little play from the end of the table. Dorian would tell a story about almost getting noticed by a scout, almost landing a better job, almost starting a training business. Everyone leaned in. Then someone would ask me how work was. Before I could answer, Tessa needed help carrying dishes, or Brielle needed her coat. Or someone would say, "Maren doesn't mind. She's always been steady." One year, Aunt Miriam followed me into the kitchen while I was rinsing gravy off the good plates and said, "Honey, they don't think you're stronger. They just found out you complain less." I laughed because I thought she was being dramatic. Miriam didn't laugh back. I kept rinsing the plate even after it was clean. She dried one beside me, set it in the rack, and looked at me like she had been waiting 30 years for me to stop mistaking endurance for peace. After Elliot died, the old family rule showed up in a new costume. It was no longer Dorian has potential. It became Brielle has a gift. Same sentence. Smaller shoes. The family didn't abandon the old religion. They just changed the name on the altar. Tessa said it with the shine of a woman who had learned how to turn a child's hobby into a family investment plan. Dorian said it, like a man relieved that destiny had skipped him but landed close enough for him to still collect applause. And I, trained since childhood to be the steady one, opened my banking app and told myself it was support. I can see now how convenient I must have looked to them. A widow with a hospital job, a daughter who returned texts, a sister who kept receipts but did not send invoices, a mother still negotiating with grief, hoping proximity could pass for safety. That is what they counted on. Not my wealth. I was not wealthy. My fear. That fear was still sitting beside me the Sunday Dorian invited me over for dinner. He didn't call it a meeting. Families like ours called it pressure dinner, or catching up, or just a little conversation. As if putting mashed potatoes on the table could make money sound less like money. Tessa texted me at 10:14 that morning with 3 heart emojis and a photo of Brielle in a black leotard, 1 foot pointed, and chin lifted. She looked older than 11, in the way kids do when grown folks have already started shaping them into projects. 6 o'clock, Tessa wrote. Nothing fancy. We just want to talk about Brielle's next step. I knew what next step meant before I ever saw the folder. I brought Lila because back then I still believed family dinners were safe places for children. Dorian's house smelled like roast chicken and lemon furniture polish when we walked in. Brielle was stretching in the living room while a video played on Tessa's phone. Dorian kissed the top of Lila's head, called her kiddo, then asked if hospital parking was still expensive, which was his way of checking whether I was already complaining about money before he asked for mine. The folder was on the dining table beside the salad bowl. Glossy white, gold lettering. Keystone Youth Performance Academy. Tessa had positioned it where I would have to see it but not touch it until she was ready. That was one of her talents. She could make an ambush look like table decor. Dinner itself was polite in the way a closed door is polite. Dorian talked too loudly about Brielle's showcase. Tessa corrected him twice on the terminology. Brielle watched her parents between bites, already trained to measure the air. Lila colored a cardinal on the back of a paper napkin, with the red crayon she kept in my purse. After the plates were cleared, Tessa folded her hands on the table and smiled. "So," she said, Keystone offered Brielle a development spot. Dorian leaned back like the offer had come from Broadway itself. "They don't give these to everybody, March." I looked at the folder. I did not reach for it. Tessa opened it anyway. Inside were photos of smiling children under stage lights, a payment schedule, and a line circled in blue ink. Deposit due in 10 days. $12,000. For a moment, nobody spoke. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a dog barked twice and stopped. I remember those little sounds because my body was trying to leave before my manners could catch up. Tessa tapped the number with one polished nail. "We're not asking you to pay for everything, just the deposit. Once she's in, opportunities open up." Dorian nodded. "You know how this works. You invest early." There was that word again. Invest. I thought of Lila's piano flyer curling under the magnet on our refrigerator. I thought of the bucket under her ceiling. I thought of the way my checking account always seemed to recover just enough for someone else's emergency. "I can't do that," I said. Tessa blinked once. Dorian looked confused, as if I had answered a question he had not asked. "You can't?" he said. "No," I said, and my voice sounded strange to me. Not loud, not angry, just present. "My answer is no." Tessa kept smiling, but it still felt colder. "Maren, you have a stable hospital job. Benefits. Predictable hours. You understand paperwork. You could make this easy." "That doesn't make it mine," I said. Dorian laughed under his breath, but the laugh wasn't amused. "She's your niece. And Lila is my daughter." Everyone went still. I felt it before anyone answered. Brielle stopped moving her fork. Lila kept coloring, but slower now. Tessa closed the folder with careful fingers. "Brielle has something special. I would hate for her to remember who believed in her and who didn't. I should have defended myself. I should have explained the roof, the car, the savings account I was trying to build one tired paycheck at a time. But reasons are handles. People grab reasons like handles, and they pull your no around the room until it comes off as selfish. So I said only, 'I love Brielle. I'm not paying the deposit.'" The silence after that was not empty. It was full of counting. Tessa stood to clear cups that did not need clearing. Dorian stared at the table. Brielle looked down at her lap. Lila slid her napkin, drawing toward me, a red bird with uneven wings. At the door, Tessa hugged me with her elbows. "We'll remember who showed up," she whispered. I drove home with Lila, half asleep in the back seat. Her cardinal drawing was folded in my coat pocket. I thought the hard part was over. By Monday morning, Graham Pike from Keystone had found my email address. His message was polite, professional, and somehow colder than anything Tessa had said out loud. He wrote that children with rare potential need adults who are willing to make timely decisions. He wrote that a missed deposit could alter Brielle's path. He wrote that families usually find a way when the child is special. I read it twice at my kitchen counter before work, then closed my phone. I didn't know that in Tessa's mind, no was not an answer. It was an offense. Graham's email did not ask whether I was Brielle's guardian, or whether I had signed anything. It did not ask whether I could afford the deposit. It simply stepped over all of that and spoke to me like the adult expected to solve the problem. I read the phrase "rare potential" during my lunch break. I sat in the hospital cafeteria with a paper cup of soup going cold beside my tray. Around me, nurses were laughing too loudly, because that is what tired people do when the alternative is crying. I almost typed back an explanation. Then I remembered Tessa's elbow hug at the door and deleted every word. I didn't answer him. I forwarded the message to myself and saved it in a folder I had not meant to create. That week, my phone changed personality. Dorian's texts used to arrive with jokes, little complaints about work, pictures of Brielle at practice. Now they came clipped and formal, like invoices pretending to be feelings. Deadline is still Friday. We need to know where you stand. Don't let this become something bigger than it has to be. Tessa went softer, which was worse. She sent a video of Brielle turning under stage lights, then added one sentence meant to find a bruise. She asked me if family stops being family when money gets inconvenient. For 12 minutes, I held the phone in both hands and felt the old machinery start up inside me. The part that wanted to fix the tone. The part that wanted to send half the deposit just to quiet the room. The part that had survived childhood by becoming easy to forgive and easier to use. I typed, "I love Brielle." My answer has not changed. No explanation, no apology, no list of my bills, just the sentence, sitting there plain and unhelpful to anyone trying to turn it into a negotiation. Tessa replied with a thumbs up. Somehow, that hurt more than a paragraph. Still, Thursday night, I sat at my kitchen table with a stack of green envelopes and cardinal stickers spread beside a grocery store birthday banner. Lila stood on a chair next to me, serious as a foreman, deciding which sticker each guest deserved. Junie Patel got the brightest bird. Mrs. Nadine Holloway got two, because Lila said old ladies appreciated details. When I wrote Brielle's name on an envelope, Lila leaned against my arm and smiled. "She'll come, right?" she asked. "She likes my drawings even when she says they're weird." That was the sentence that kept the invitation in the pile. I wish I could tell you I hesitated because I saw the warning signs clearly. I didn't. I saw a 7-year-old girl trying to keep a cousin. I saw my own fear wearing a reasonable coat. So I sealed the envelope and pressed a red bird sticker over the flap. I dropped it at the post office on my way to work Friday morning. The slot swallowed it with a small metal sound. I remember that sound better than I remember most of the party. Sometimes the worst days of your life are mailed carefully, with your own hand. By then, Tessa had stopped posting directly about me and started posting around me. Quotes about people who abandon gifted children. Photos of Brielle in rehearsal clothes with captions about sacrifice. A blurry shot of a coffee mug that said, "Dance Mom," angled beside the Keystone folder just enough for the gold lettering to show. Dorian shared one of them with a prayer hands emoji. I did not respond. I bought hot dogs, paper plates, red candles, and one tube of black decorating gel for the cardinal's eye. At checkout, the cashier asked if someone was having a birthday. I said yes, my daughter, 7, and for one clean second, I let myself feel happy. That was the last clean second before the party began. Friday night, Lila and I baked the cardinal cake. We took Elliot's notebook down from the top kitchen shelf, the one place high enough that daily life could not rub against it. The red velvet page had a thumbprint of cocoa near the corner and a smear of vanilla that had dried years ago into a pale crescent. Lila stood on her chair in pajamas, with yellow stars on them, and read the ingredients out loud like she was calling someone home. When the batter turned deep red, she leaned over the bowl and whispered, "Hi, Dad." I pretended to check the oven temperature so she would not see my face change. We poured the layers into 2 round pans, and while they baked, Lila asked the question she always saved for quiet rooms. "Do you think Dad still knows when it's my birthday?" I wiped flour from her cheek with my thumb and said, "I think dads always know the birthdays they loved first." She nodded like that made sense. Like the universe had passed inspection. Saturday came bright and warm, the kind of Pittsburgh June day that makes every backyard look more forgiving than it is. By noon, red balloons moved against the fence. Paper cardinals hung from string, and the folding table wore a white cloth weighted at the corners with soup cans wrapped in ribbon. I had set 3 small pots of herbs near the back steps that morning to clear space on the patio. Junie Patel arrived first with a handmade card and a gift bag bigger than her knees. Mrs. Nadine Holloway stood on her side of the hedge, pretending to water the marigolds for 20 minutes. Retired librarians know how to watch without looking nosy. Dorian, Tessa, and Brielle arrived at 1:56, which should have warned me, because Dorian's family was never early, unless they needed the room to see them being considerate. Tessa wore white linen and a soft smile. Brielle had a small backpack over one shoulder and kept touching the zipper. Dorian handed Lila a gift bag and called the decorations cute. That's what people say when they want credit for not calling it cheap. Brielle looked at the cake through the sliding door and then quickly looked away. At 2:40, while the children chased each other around the sprinkler, I saw Tessa guide Brielle toward the side of the garage, their heads bent close together. Brielle shook hers once, small and fast. Tessa put both hands on her daughter's shoulders and smiled the kind of smile that does not reach the eyes. Across the hedge, Mrs. Nadine stopped watering. Her hand stayed on the hose, but the water was hitting the same patch of fence. I felt something lift inside me, a quiet warning. Then Lila called for more lemonade, and I did what I had been trained to do. I served the room instead of listening to myself. At 3 o'clock, I carried the cake outside. The children gathered like a tide around the table. Lila stood in front of it, wearing her red birthday dress, both hands clasped under her chin. I had forgotten the lighter and my phone inside. I stepped through the sliding door. 15 seconds, maybe 20. When I came back, Brielle was beside the table with one of the herb pots in her hands. Wet dirt clung to the rim. She looked at Tessa first, then at Lila, then turned the pot over. The dirt fell in one heavy slide over the cardinal's red wing. It smothered the black candy eye and the shaky white letters my daughter had piped herself. Happy 7th. Lila disappeared one word at a time. The yard went silent. One of the boys dropped a paper cup. Lila did not move. She just stared at the ruined bird, her candle still unlit in my hand, and waited for an adult to explain whether love could be scraped clean. Brielle's face had gone gray. She held the empty pot like it had become too heavy to set down. Then she said it, small and scared and awful. My mom said it's just a cake. Tessa stepped forward with a practiced sigh that sounded rehearsed. Maren, don't make this dramatic. Kids do stupid things. Dorian looked at the ground and muttered, It's dirt, Maren. You can buy another cake before dinner. Behind them, my daughter's mouth opened once, but no sound came out. I wanted to scream so loudly the windows shook. Instead, I put the lighter on the table, lifted Lila into my arms, and felt her whole body go stiff against mine. As I carried her inside, I heard Tessa tell someone, She's sensitive because of Elliot. That was the moment the last soft part of me went quiet. Not gone, quiet, like a door closing carefully so it would not wake a child. The house did that terrible thing houses do after people leave. It kept the shape of the damage without making any sound. Outside, I could hear car doors closing, parents using soft voices, children being told to say thank you even though nobody knew what they were thanking me for anymore. Inside, Lila sat on the bottom stair, with Elliot's notebook pressed flat against her chest. Her red dress had a smear of frosting near the hem. Not dirt, frosting. Somehow that detail almost undid me. I cleaned because cleaning was safer than thinking. I wrapped what was left of the cake in a trash bag. I unwrapped it because throwing Elliot's handwriting away felt wrong, even though the handwriting was only in the notebook and not in the cake. Grief is not logical. I washed the glass stand twice. I wiped dirt from the table. I picked one black candy eye out of the grass and held it in my palm like evidence from a crime scene no one wanted to call a crime. By 7, the house was quiet enough I could hear Lila breathe from the living room. She had not cried much. That worried me more than sobbing would have. She sat curled under Elliot's old gray sweatshirt, staring at a cartoon she was not watching. I sat beside her and said the thing mothers say when they are trying to build a bridge from nothing. Brielle made a bad choice today, honey. That was not your fault. Lila did not look at me right away. Her fingers worried the cuff of the sweatshirt, rolling it and unrolling it until the fabric twisted. Then she said, very carefully, I don't think it was her choice. I felt my body go still before my mind understood why. 7-year-olds do not use sentences like that unless they have been carrying something too heavy for their size. I turned off the television. The room became so quiet, I could hear the refrigerator click on in the kitchen. She told me she had gone looking for sidewalk chalk before the cake came out. The pink chalk, because Junie wanted to draw birds on the driveway. Near the garage, behind the recycling bins, she heard Tessa and Brielle. Lila said Brielle sounded upset. Not angry, upset. She was asking, but it's her birthday, and Tessa said, that is why she will remember it. My daughter repeated those words without understanding how cruel they were, which somehow made them crueler. Then came the part that changed the room around me. Brielle asked, do I still get it if I can't do it? Tessa said, if you do it right, your dad and I will get the iPad before academy starts. Lila looked at her knees when she told me that. Like she was embarrassed to have heard it. Like the grown-ups had done something dirty, and she was the one who needed to wash her hands. Then she whispered, Brielle said she didn't want to. Aunt Tessa said she had to show you what disappointment feels like. I sat there with my daughter's small voice landing in my lap, sentence by sentence, and I understood the difference between a ruined party and a message. This had not been a child acting out. This had been a lesson planned by an adult who could not survive being told no. Tessa had not wanted to damage a cake. She had wanted to damage my peace, and because she knew where I was softest, she aimed through my daughter. I asked Lila why she had not told me before. She shrugged, one shoulder lifting under the sweatshirt. I thought maybe I heard it wrong, she said. And then everybody was looking. That is childhood, I think. Not innocence exactly, but the terrible hope that adults will make sense if you wait long enough. I pulled her close, and she finally cried into my shirt, hard and hot and quiet, the way children cry when they are trying not to make one more problem. At 8:12, my phone buzzed. It was Mrs. Nadine Holloway. Her text was short, careful, and old-fashioned, with punctuation in all the right places. Maren, I do not want to interfere, but I saw Tessa speaking to Brielle by the garage before the cake. Brielle looked distressed. If you ever need me to say that plainly, I will. I read it once. Then again. Then I set the phone face down, because my hands had started to shake. That was when the anger finally arrived. Not hot, not loud. Cold enough to think with. I tucked Lila into bed with Elliot's notebook on the nightstand, instead of under her pillow, because I told her memories should not have to hide. I kissed her forehead and waited until her breathing softened. Then I walked downstairs, opened my laptop on the kitchen table, and created a new folder beside family support. I named it Receipts. I named the folder Receipts. For the first time in 42 months, I opened family support without trying to protect myself from it. The spreadsheet filled the screen in neat little rows, all those quiet numbers pretending they had not rearranged my life. Keystone monthly fee. Phone line. Camp deposit. Shoes. Competition jacket. Brake repair. Groceries. Utility payment. Myrtle Beach reservation. Every memo was written in my own careful shorthand. The language of a woman trying to make sacrifice look temporary. I scrolled slowly, month by month. It felt like watching someone drain a bathtub with a teaspoon. Nothing looked catastrophic by itself. That was the trick. $540 did not look like betrayal. $96 did not look like fear. A grocery order did not look like a childhood pattern wearing new clothes. But together they had weight. Together they had a shape. At the bottom of the column, in the empty cell I had avoided like a locked door, I typed the formula and hit enter. 4,3780元,62美分. The number appeared without fanfare or warning, with no respect for what it had just ended. I sat back in my kitchen chair and let it look at me. $43,780.62. That was not generosity anymore. That was a mortgage on belonging. That was piano lessons Lila never took. That was roof work I postponed. Tires I promised myself I could stretch another season. That was every time I told my daughter maybe later so someone else could say right now. Then I stopped being sentimental. I started being accurate. I logged into the travel portal and canceled the Myrtle Beach trip. $6,420, minus a fee I paid like tuition. I turned off the Keystone autopay. I removed Brielle's phone line from my account at the end of the billing cycle, with enough time for Dorian to transfer it if he chose to become responsible in writing. I downloaded every receipt, every email from Graham Pike, every message from Tessa that used a child's name like a hook. At 1:17 inches the morning, I opened a blank email. Subject: Family support account closed. I addressed it to Dorian and Tessa, copied Graham because he had made himself part of the account, and blind copied myself because old habits die with documentation. I kept the message plain. No insults. No poetry. Just dates, amounts, canceled commitments, and one sentence I read 3 times before sending. This is not revenge. This is the end of an account that was never supposed to become my price of admission into this family. I scheduled it for 6 a.m., closed the laptop, and stood in the dark kitchen listening to the house breathe around me. Upstairs, my daughter slept beside the first clean truth I had given her all day. Memories should not have to hide. Downstairs, the money stopped moving before anyone knew it. That was the quietest thing I had ever done. It would become the loudest. At 6:00 a.m., the email went out while I was making pancakes. I did not watch the screen. I did not sit beside the laptop like a woman waiting for a verdict. Lila was at the counter in Elliot's sweatshirt, stirring batter too slowly, and for once I let her make the lumps. Syrup mattered more than precision that morning. At 6:18, my phone lit up. Dorian, then Dorian again, then Tessa, then a number I recognized from Keystone. I turned the phone face down and flipped the first pancake. By 8:30, the voicemails had piled up around the house. Dorian's first message was confused, almost gentle. "Mar, what is this? Call me." The second had edges. The third was all edges. Tessa's voice came in wet and sharp, saying I was humiliating them over a child's mistake, that Brielle had cried herself sick, that no decent aunt would cancel a summer over dirt. Graham Pike kept his tone professional, which somehow made it worse. He said withdrawing support so abruptly could affect a child's developmental confidence. Nobody said Lila's name. That was the first thing I wrote down in a notebook beside my coffee. Not one of them asked how my daughter slept. Not one asked if she ate breakfast, or whether the little girl whose birthday had ended with dirt on her father's cake was all right. They asked about deposits, deadlines, access, optics. Tessa left one message saying the phone line was cruel because Brielle had photos on it. Dorian said the Myrtle Beach cancellation made him look bad to his in-laws. Graham wrote that reconsideration would reflect well on everyone involved. Around noon, Tessa moved the trial to the family group chat. She wrote that I was punishing Brielle because I could not regulate my grief, and that some people use widowhood as permission to become bitter. I read that sentence standing in the laundry room with Lila's red dress soaking in the sink, dirt spreading through the fabric in brown blotches. For a second, the old me reached for the keyboard. The old me wanted to explain, attach screenshots, make them understand the shape of what they had done. I did not. Instead, I took a picture of the sink for myself, not for them. Then I typed one private message to Dorian. "A child was punished when your wife used her to hurt mine. Read the email again." I sent it and put the phone in a kitchen drawer. Not because I was calm. Because I knew if I kept holding it, I would start donating pieces of my boundary just to make the buzzing stop. Later that afternoon, Annika Reed came by with soup in a glass container and the look of a woman who had heard enough hospital hallway stories to know when silence was medical care. I let her read the email at my kitchen table. She finished, nodded once, and said, "Don't turn a boundary into an essay. People who profit from confusion hate short sentences." Then she pointed at my phone in the drawer and added, "Leave it there." Reed Callahan called at 4:40 after reviewing the documents I had forwarded. His voice was young, but steady. He confirmed what I needed to hear. The payments were voluntary, the trip was in my name, the phone plan was mine, and Graham had no contract with me. "You're not breaking an agreement," he said. "You're ending a habit." I wrote that down too, because sometimes the truth needs a witness before it feels legal. That evening, Dorian sent one final text. "Tessa wants everyone at our house Sunday. We need to talk like adults." I looked at the words for a long time. Talk like adults. In my family, that usually meant one person would apologize and the others would call it healing. But this time, I knew exactly what I was walking into. Not dinner, not reconciliation, an audit. Sunday dinner smelled like garlic, lemon chicken, and old strategy. I left Lila with Annika, not because I was ashamed to bring her, but because that table had already proven it could turn children into tools. When I arrived, Tessa opened the door with the warm, injured face people wear when they have rehearsed forgiveness without ever considering accountability. Dorian stood behind her in a button-down shirt, arms crossed. On the dining table sat the Keystone folder, a printed copy of my email, and a seat left open beside Brielle like a trap with a cushion. Graham Pike was there too, which told me everything. He stood when I entered, offered his hand, and said, "I hope we can find a constructive path forward." I looked at his hand long enough for him to lower it. Aunt Miriam sat near the window with her purse still on her lap, the way witnesses sit when they know they may need to leave quickly. Brielle would not look at me. Her shoulders were curved inward, and I hated every adult in that room a little more for putting her there. Dinner passed like paperwork. Plates moved. Glasses filled. Nobody tasted anything. Then Tessa folded her napkin and began. "We all got emotional," she said, eyes wet but voice clean. "But Brielle's future should not suffer because of one unfortunate moment at a child's party." Graham nodded as if she had submitted a proposal. Dorian added, "You're her aunt, Maren. You're supposed to help." I waited until the silence after his sentence had nowhere else to go. Then I took the spreadsheet from my purse and laid it beside the chicken. "For 42 months, I said, I paid to stay welcome here." Nobody moved. Lessons, camps, phones, groceries, repairs, trips, $43,780.62. I never asked for applause. I told myself it was love. Tessa opened her mouth, but I kept going. Then my daughter's birthday cake became the receipt. Her face hardened. "It was just cake." I turned to her. "No, it was my daughter's last safe place with this family." Dorian's chair scraped back. "You're being dramatic." I looked at him then. I really looked past the charm, past the almost, past every year I had mistaken his need for my duty. "I wasn't your sister at this table," I said. "I was the card on file." The room went very still. Even Graham stopped arranging his expression. "The card is declined now." Tessa whispered my name like a warning. I turned to Brielle before anyone could use her again. "You are not responsible for the adults who taught you to trade kindness for rewards. My door can stay open to you, my wallet will not." Aunt Miriam set her fork down. "She's telling the truth," she said, and her voice carried more weight than volume. This started long before Brielle. Tessa stood so quickly her glass shook. "If you walk out now, don't expect Thanksgiving." I picked up my purse. My hands were steady, which surprised me. "A seat I have to pay for is not a family table," I said. "It's rent." Then I walked out before they could call the bill love again. I made it to the end of Dorian's driveway before my hands started shaking. Not the graceful kind of shaking people describe after brave moments. Mine was ugly and practical, keys rattling against the steering wheel, breath catching in my throat. For a few minutes, I just sat there with the engine running, looking at a porch light I had once mistaken for belonging. I had not lost a family at that table. I had finally stopped buying the idea of who they were. When I got home, Lila was asleep on the couch under the quilt Elliot's grandmother made, one sock half off, her cheek pressed into the fabric. Anika had left soup warming on the stove, and a note that said, "You did not overreact." I stood in the doorway and let that sentence hold me up. Then, I carried my daughter to bed, tucked the quilt around her, and for the first time in years, the silence in my house did not feel like abandonment, it felt like room. The next 90 days were not magical. Dorian stopped calling. Tessa told her version to anyone who enjoyed a clean villain. Graham received a formal complaint from me, and a much colder follow-up from Reed Callahan. Keystone removed me from every contact list by the end of the week. The old $540 payment now goes into Lila's education account on the first of every month. Same number. Different future. Aunt Miriam started coming by on Sundays with banana bread and no questions that sounded like invoices. In September, we held Lila's birthday do-over in the backyard. Smaller this time. Junie Patel came with sidewalk chalk. Mrs. Nadine brought lemonade in a glass pitcher and pretended not to cry when Lila showed her the new cake. It leaned a little to one side, red frosting uneven, black candy eyes slightly too large. Lila called it perfect because 7-year-olds understand resurrection better than adults do. We lit the candles. She made a wish. Nobody at that table had been paid to be there. 3 weeks later, a small envelope arrived with Brielle's name in the corner. Inside was a drawing of 2 girls standing beside a red bird cake, and beneath it, in careful pencil, she had written, "I'm sorry about the cake. Nobody told me to say that." I read the last line twice. Then I wrote back, "I know, sweetheart. That's how I know it's honest and real." Here is what I learned from one ruined cake, 42 months of receipts, and a family table that finally named its price. Love is not a membership fee. If someone makes your child pay for your seat at their table, leave the table, build another one. Start small, use what you have. And make sure everyone sitting there came because they wanted to, not because your card cleared. Sometimes, the hardest lesson in life is spotting when love becomes a bill. It is learning when love has been turned into a bill. For years, Maren believed that if she gave enough, stayed quiet enough, forgave fast enough, and paid one more time, she could keep a family together for her daughter. And that is a very human thing to do. When you've lost someone and your home has an empty chair, it's hard. When your child looks at you with questions you can't fix, you start bargaining with pain. You tell yourself that peace is worth the cost. You tell yourself that being useful is close enough to being loved. Real love does not ask you to make yourself small. It does not ask your child to suffer so other people can stay comfortable. It does not punish you for saying no. It does not call your boundaries selfish while holding out its hand for more. The ruined cake was painful, but it was also a revelation. It showed Maren what the receipts had been trying to tell her for years. She was not protecting her daughter by paying to stay at that table. She was teaching her daughter that love could be purchased, rented, and withdrawn whenever someone wanted control. Healing started the moment Maren stopped buying a seat. That is the quiet strength many people never talk about. Not revenge, not shouting, not proving every point to every relative. Just closing the account. Choosing peace over approval. Choosing your child's safety over a family image. Choosing a smaller table where the love is real, instead of a crowded one where your seat has a price. And maybe that is the lesson for all of us. Family is not always the people who claim the title. Family are the folks who show up without turning help into leverage. Love is not an invoice. Loyalty is not a subscription. And the moment someone makes your pain the price of admission, you are allowed to leave. If this story reminded you of a boundary you need to set, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from, and if this message touched you, please subscribe for more stories about quiet strength, hard truths, and the moment good people finally choose themselves.